Right. So are you ready for this? We're diving deep on like a potential new axis of threat.
Oh, wow.
And trust me, this isn't like some Duffy Cold War flashback.
Right.
This is like ripped from the headlines. We're talking about like a potential alliance that could like seriously shake things up on the world stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's so fascinating about this is we're not dealing with hypotheticals.
Yeah.
This isn't just like, what if this happened? This deep dive is like anchored in a real intelligence report called New Threats Are Emerging.
Oh, wow.
And let me tell you, this thing reads like a spy novel.
Okay, so lay it on me. What's the report actually saying? Who are the players here, and why should we be worried?
Okay, so essentially it's laying out the possibility, and it's crucial to emphasize possibility here.
Right.
Because, global politics are like this constantly shifting puzzle.
Yeah.
It's laying out the possibility of Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran joining forces. And each nation brings, its own unique set of strengths and dangers to the table.
Okay, now that's a lineup that definitely gets my attention.
Yeah.
You've got some serious heavy hitters there, each with their own history and motives.
Absolutely.
But let's unpack this a bit. What exactly would each nation bring to this potential alliance?
Okay, so let's start with Russia.
Okay.
They're not exactly newcomers to geopolitical power plays.
All right.
And as we've seen recently, they're not afraid to flex their military muscle.
Yeah.
Remember the NotPetya attack back in 2017?
Yeah, vaguely.
It crippled businesses worldwide and was traced back to Russian military intelligence.
Oh, wow.
That's the kind of disruption they're capable of.
Right, so they've got the experience and the willingness to use force.
Right.
But their real ace in the hole is their cyber warfare expertise, right?
Exactly. They're masters of disinformation, hacking, and just creating digital chaos.
Wow.
They've already proven they can infiltrate critical infrastructure and sow discord in democratic elections.
Right.
Imagine that kind of expertise amplified on a global scale.
That's a chilling thought. And then you've got North Korea, like the wild card in this whole scenario.
Right.
They might not have Russia's sophistication, but they've certainly got the world's attention with their nuclear weapons and unpredictable behavior.
Absolutely. North Korea's cyber capabilities might not be as advanced,
Yeah.
but they're still a potent force.
Right.
Don't forget the WannaCry ransomware attack a few years back.
Oh, yeah.
That caused billions in damages globally and was linked to North Korean hackers.
Wow.
They're a rogue state with a track record of lashing out.
And let's not forget about China. They're like the rising superpower in this equation,
Right.
with an economy and a tech sector that's like rapidly challenging the West's dominance.
China is arguably the most significant player in this potential axis.
Yeah.
They've made it clear that they intend to reshape the global order, and they're rapidly developing the means to do it. Think, large-scale industrial espionage control over critical supply chains and the ability to manipulate global markets.
Yeah.
They're a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
Right. So you've got economic power, technological prowess, and a clear ambition to become the world's leading superpower.
Absolutely.
And last but not least, you've got Iran, a nation with a long history of anti-Western sentiment and a growing arsenal of cyber weapons.
Iran adds a whole other layer of complexity to this potential axis.
Right.
They've got this network of proxies and militias operating across the Middle East, and they've been linked to numerous cyber attacks against Western targets, including financial institutions and energy companies.
Oh, wow.
They're experts at asymmetric warfare, using unconventional tactics to disrupt and destabilize their adversaries.
Okay, so we're not just talking about a bunch of nations just grumbling about the West.
Right.
This report is suggesting they might actually be teaming up.
Yeah.
Now, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
What are the specific threats that this report outlines? What should we be prepared for?
That's where things get really interesting and a bit unsettling.
Okay.
The report doesn't just list the players.
Right.
It gets into the nitty-gritty of how this alliance might operate and what their goals might be.
All right, so hit me with it. What are we talking about here? What's the worst case scenario?
Well, imagine this. A coordinated cyber attack that cripples critical infrastructure
Oh, wow.
across multiple Western nations simultaneously,
Okay.
power grids going down, transportation systems grinding to a halt,
Yeah.
financial markets thrown into chaos.
Oh, man.
It's the kind of scenario that could bring entire economies to their knees.
That's straight out of a nightmare scenario. But couldn't we just retaliate with our own cyber attacks?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the West has some pretty sophisticated cyber capabilities too, right?
That's where things get tricky.
Okay.
Attributing cyber attacks with certainty is incredibly difficult.
Right.
And even if we could pinpoint the source, the risk of escalation is enormous.
Yeah.
We're talking about a potential cyber conflict that could quickly spiral out of control with unpredictable and devastating consequences.
Okay, so cyber warfare is a huge concern.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about the good old-fashioned information war.
Yeah.
It feels like we're already drowning in a sea of disinformation.
Right.
How would this alliance amplify that threat?
Imagine a coordinated disinformation campaign designed to sow discord and undermine trust in democratic institutions.
Okay.
They could manipulate social media algorithms, flood the internet with deepfakes,
Wow.
and hack into legitimate media outlets to spread their propaganda.
Oh, geez.
It would be incredibly difficult to discern truth from fiction in such an environment.
Yeah, it's like a full-on assault on reality itself.
Right.
But it's not just about manipulating information, right?
No.
This alliance could also use its combined economic might to wage economic warfare.
Absolutely. Think about it.
Yeah.
China controls vast portions of global supply chains. Russia's a major energy supplier.
Right.
Iran could disrupt shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf. Wow.
They could coordinate their actions to create shortages, manipulate prices, and destabilize Western economies.
So it's not just about military might.
Right.
They could cripple us without firing a single shot, just by leveraging their economic power and control over key resources.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the potential for military aggression.
Oh, right.
They could coordinate military exercises, deploy troops to strategic locations,
Okay.
and back proxy wars in regions vital to Western interests.
Yeah.
The goal wouldn't necessarily be to conquer territory,
Right.
but to disrupt the balance of power, create chaos, and erode Western influence.
So it's a multi-pronged assault, cyber attacks, disinformation, economic warfare, and the constant threat of military escalation.
Yeah.
This all sounds incredibly bleak. What are the implications for the West if this alliance becomes a reality? I mean, are we just doomed?
I wouldn't say doomed, but it's definitely a wake-up call.
Yeah.
The West needs to recognize the potential severity of this threat and adapt its strategies accordingly. Okay, so what needs to change? What can we do to counter this emerging threat?
First, we need to shore up our cyber defenses.
Okay.
We're talking about investing in cutting-edge technology, strengthening partnerships between governments and the private sector, and developing more resilient infrastructure. Think of it like building a digital fortress.
So a massive upgrade to our cyber defenses. But it's not just about technology, is it?
Right.
People need to be more aware of the risks and how to protect themselves.
Absolutely. Media literacy is crucial. People need to be able to critically evaluate information, identify disinformation, and understand how they're being targeted. We need to equip citizens with the tools to navigate this increasingly complex information landscape.
So we're talking about education, critical thinking skills.
Right.
And empowering people to be more discerning consumers of information.
Exactly.
What about diplomacy? Can't we just try to talk things out and resolve these differences peacefully?
Diplomacy is always essential,
Right.
but it's unlikely to be a silver bullet in this situation. We're dealing with nations that have fundamentally different ideologies and strategic goals.
Yeah.
That said, maintaining open channels of communication is still crucial,
Right.
even if it's just to reduce the risk of misunderstandings and miscalculations.
Okay, so keep talking, but don't expect miracles.
Right.
What about economic tools? Could sanctions or trade restrictions be used to pressure these nations into changing their behavior?
Economic tools are certainly part of the equation. Targeted sanctions can be effective in applying pressure and limiting the resources available to these nations, but we need to be strategic about how we use them.
Right.
Broad-based sanctions can backfire, causing unintended economic damage and alienating potential allies.
Right. So we need to be smart about sanctions,
Yeah.
target the right people, the right industries, and make sure we're not hurting ourselves in the process.
Exactly.
What about military deterrence? Does that still have a role to play in this new world order?
Absolutely. Maintaining a credible military deterrent is essential. Okay.
We need to make it clear that any aggression against the West or our allies will be met with a swift and decisive response. That doesn't necessarily mean a massive military buildup,
Right.
but it does require investments in key technologies such as hypersonic weapons and advanced missile defense systems.
So we need to be prepared to fight, but the focus should be on preventing conflict in the first place.
Yes.
And that's where all these other tools come in, right?
Right.
Cyber defenses, countering disinformation, diplomacy, economic statecraft. It's all about creating a multi-layered strategy to deter aggression and protect our interests.
Precisely. This is a complex and evolving challenge.
Yeah.
And there's no easy solution.
Right.
It requires a comprehensive and adaptive approach, one that leverages all the tools at our disposal, from diplomacy and deterrence to cyber defense and information warfare.
So we've got this potential axis of threat, brewing, and it's a lot more complex than just a few nations with differing opinions.
Yeah.
This report really lays out how the world is changing and how the West needs to adapt. Absolutely.
Out of everything we've discussed, what strikes you as the most concerning element of this potential alliance?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's hard to pinpoint just one thing, but I think what really keeps me up at night is the blurring of lines between physical and digital threats.
Okay.
The idea that these nations could seamlessly blend cyber attacks with disinformation campaigns in traditional military maneuvers is what makes this so different from anything we've seen before.
Right.
It's not just about tanks and troops anymore. It's about disrupting entire societies, sowing chaos, and eroding trust from within.
It's like they're playing chess on multiple boards at the same time while we're still trying to figure out the rules of the game.
Exactly.
But here's a question for you and for our listener. What's the end game here? What are they ultimately trying to achieve?
That's the million-dollar question. It's unlikely they're aiming for global domination in the traditional sense. It's more about reshaping the global order, shifting the balance of power away from the West, and creating a world where their ideologies and interests hold more sway. Think about it like this. They want to write the rules of the 21st century, not necessarily conquer it outright.
So it's about influence control and setting the agenda for the future.
Right.
And that's where things get really tricky, because it's not a clear-cut battle with easily defined objectives.
Exactly. It's a constant struggle for influence. A game of strategy and perception, where the battlefield extends from the physical world to cyberspace and the minds of people.
So to our listener, we've given you a glimpse into a potential future, one that's full of challenges but also opportunities. What stood out to you in this deep dive? Remember, this report is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
I'd encourage you to think critically about the information you encounter, question your assumptions, and stay informed about the evolving geopolitical landscape. The future is not predetermined. The choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow.
That's a great point. This isn't about passively observing events. It's about actively engaging with the world, understanding the forces at play, and contributing to a more informed and resilient society. Stay curious, stay engaged, and until next time, keep diving deep.